David, in your book, Chapter 8, the title of that chapter is Cancel Culture, Jewish Style. I didn't get a chance to read it. I wanted to ask you, what is that? And this will actually tie us back to Kanye, because the tweet that he made after the very offensive tweet that got deleted by Twitter was, who do you think created cancel culture? And you know what he's insinuating there. So can you expound on that chapter title, please? That one.
Yeah, so it's interesting, by the way, that you just said that. I posted about my book in several sort of anti-CRT Facebook groups and the like, because, those are people who might read my book. And of course, I got a lot of really enthusiastic endorsements of it. Wow, this is great. I've been watching this and I've been wondering about it. And of course, there are Jewish people on every group who are like, yes, I'm going to buy your book. I'm going to buy your book. And every single instance, somebody would chime in there and say, stop whining. You Jews created cancel culture in the first place. And you're the ones who created wokeness, so stop bitching about it. So, God. So that happened too, which is a reminder of the more traditional vernacular of anti-Semitism, that, you Jews are acting in accord with each other and are. The claim is that it's people like Marcuse and some of the Jewish German intellectual thinkers that came in and they created cancel culture, as if that's somehow all the Judaism, or Jewish people. By the way, they conveniently ignore the fact that a lot of the people who are most opposed to it are Jews, like Barry Weiss and Sam Harris and Eric Weinstein, and a lot of the people that are involved in our organization. So a lot of them are Jews too, but those people don't count. Only the people.
There's the essentialism again.
Count. Right, exactly. So what do I mean by that? Like, there is a unique form of Jewish cancel culture that I started to experience. When I first came out, about being sort of critical of wokeness, and I wrote an article. There was this sort of Twitter flame war that emerged, and you had all these rabbis. Somehow there was a progressive rabbi posted it, and she had a lot of progressive rabbi followers, and they started chiming in, and they were articulating this sort of like, you've had space, and now is the time to make space for others, and that may feel like cancel culture to you, but it's not. And my pushback was, that is cancel culture. In fact, you're telling me that somebody gets to determine who has space and who doesn't, and that's presumably you or your friends, and you get to silence anybody else who you decide were once privileged and had a place at the table, and you're going to make space for others. And too bad if you don't want to abide by that. These rules, those are the new rules. So that was sort of a unique Jewish version of this. My organization created what we call the Jewish Harper's Letter, which was patterned after the Harper's Letter that Thomas Chatterton Williams did, and in wake of the George Floyd killing. And it was a letter that written by we also did a rabbi's letter, and the rabbi's letter was signed by 250 Reforming conservative rabbis, warning against this sort of censorious culture in the Jewish community, and about how the dangers that it might bring. And there was a prominent woman conservative rabbi who posted in a rabbinical listserv that she has real problems with the current environment, and she doesn't think it's open. And she was called a transphobe, and she was called a racist, and people piled on her and so forth. And these are other rabbis who are doing that. And so, in general, the Jewish community tends to abide by certain civility code. You can't be too much of an asshole, but you can be just enough of an asshole to stifle discourse. And I saw a lot of that on the front lines of this, and it manifested in all kinds of ways. I have this part of that book, I think it's the previous chapter, I called the McWhorter test. Batya Unger-Sargon, who I'm sure you all know, she wrote a book on woke media and the like. She was the editor of the Forward editorial page, and she decided to profile a bunch of Black heterodox thinkers like Glenn Loury and Coleman Hughes and John McWhorter. And she experienced tremendous backlash from that. And people were calling her a racist, and she ended up leaving the Forward over those controversies. And I was the head of a Jewish umbrella organization, and I yearned to bring some of those voices to the table, but knew I could not do it. Knew that if I tried to do it, I would also be similarly accused, and allowed myself to be sucked into all that. That's cancel culture. It's not, to me, cancel culture is not just about being canceled. You have to also, what is the culture part of it? What kind of culture keeps people in their place and doesn't allow them to talk and doesn't allow us to engage in a free exchange of ideas. So that's what I mean by that. It had some very specific manifestations in the Jewish community. One of the events that happened that really traumatized me in all this was a Jewish social scientist named Ira Sheskin and another one named Arnold Dashevsky wrote an article saying that a recent study on the number of Jews of color inflated the number of Jews of color. It's not 12 to 15%, as they said, but it's more like 6 or 7% based on the most recent survey data we have. They were absolutely lambasted. There was a petition drive that was signed by 2,000 Jews, many prominent Jewish names, basically calling them a racist. And the head of the reform movement, I've said it publicly, so I'll say that again, accused them of white intellectualism for just simply challenging the demographic findings of a very poorly constructed social science survey. And I was asked to sign that letter, and a lot of the people I knew were signing that letter, and I just thought it was awful. It was awful. And I called Ira Sheskin, who I've known for years, and I said, Ira, I'm sorry. I can't say anything because I had an umbrella organization, and a lot of people who criticize you are part of my organization. And I would get pushed out if I did that. He said, don't worry about it, David. I understand. I completely understand. But I don't understand. Like, that's not an acceptable price for me to pay. Mm-hmm. And that's that's cancel culture Jewish style. And I wanted to push back against that because that's not the tribe I signed up for. So yeah, these are real issues. And, there are all kinds of examples of that, people being bullied by people who were supposedly very righteous. In the name of the righteousness, they bullied people who they thought, didn't sing from the same song sheet. And I thought, okay, and they don't even realize, of course, they think that they're being righteous. And so I wanted to push back against that. I don't think that's who we should be. I don't think that should be the new culture of the Jewish people. It should be replaced by this vibe. The other thing that I saw, and it was happening everywhere, so I don't want to make it unique to the Jewish community, is what a guy named Matt Bruneck called identitarian deference. And that is that, that you decide that your institution, which might be dominated by quote unquote white people, doesn't have standing on these issues to articulate a policy on systemic racism. So you empower certain people on your behalf to make those decisions. It might be in the case of a Jewish organization, we're going to hire a Jew of color who will be our head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that person now basically gets to decide our attitude about these very complex social issues. And once they make that commitment, they sign on the dotted line of deference, they have no maneuverability anymore. They're now stuck in this. So even if they say, well, maybe we went a little too far, they can't get themselves out of it because they've already sort of signed the contract on that and they've thrown away the key in a way. And I think that that's destructive. And I think that's why even if the political winds change, even if it becomes extremely politically disadvantageous to articulate woke ideas in public, a lot of these institutions are just sort of stuck with those commitments that they made. And I think that's why they say that politics is downstream from culture. I think institutional life is far downstream from politics. And it's going to take a while to transform to sort of reclaim institutions, if we're ever able to, from making those commitments early on.
I think it's great that you're calling this out because, I do think cancel culture is universal. There's a version of it that is in the Asian community too, right? And because we do live in a world where identity politics is so prevalent, it's easier for people within the community to point out things that are wrong with the community, right? It's just easier to do that, and it almost holds more weight. So it's a good thing that you're calling it out.